Thank you. So a big welcome. And I think before we start, I'd just like to say that we learned this when we were working with Anne-Marie, who's one of the group this morning, that if you get into the Zoom early, you can have a little catch up with everyone. And we've extended that now in our webinars to about 10-15 minutes. So we can all do that thing we normally do when we come together, which is say, hi, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. So it's really nice to even done that for a while. So appreciating all of you making the time for this today. And we are delighted that we've got people we've been working with for many years and some people who we haven't seen for ages and people we've never met before. So I just want to really appreciate your time on this, and it's an issue that's close to our heart, as I'm sure it is yours. And the format for today is going to be, Sharon's going to be leading, taking us through some slides and leading us for about 10 minutes. Then we've got some of our other advisors just giving a perspective on the issues that are raised, and Ian will be introducing those. And then we're going to have an opportunity for discussions and your views, so in small groups. So we hope we'll have lots of time for discussions and get some creative ideas moving. Before we start, I'd just like to say Rosie is working, or going to be working very hard to organise the breakout rooms and the chat room. So if I could encourage you all to use the chat room, if you have questions or comments, then that would be great. And to make things a bit easier, because I think there's quite a number of us this morning, if people could turn their microphones off during the main presentations, and then we don't hear the background noise, and obviously you can turn them on when you want to speak. And we will be recording the main session, so we're not going to be recording the breakout rooms, just the main session. So we can send you the link afterwards, and then you can share it or listen to it again, whatever you fancy. Okay, the objectives for today are to gain a better understanding of women's experience during the crisis, and to recognise the gender dynamics at play in the new world and reflect on how to mitigate the challenges for men and women. So what we're hoping throughout this session is people get to kind of discuss what their experiences are and maybe thinking of ways that we could overcome those. Obviously reflecting on actions that we can all take to support women and men through the crisis, because although we're focusing on women, we know it's both men and women that can make a difference going forward. So I'm going to hand over to Ian, who's going to run through the plan for today.
Thanks, Lorna. So in terms of the plan, the key points Lorna's mainly set out already. I'm just going to really focus, as she said, on the sort of the people side of it and introducing just very briefly. So Sharon, who's going to be leading it, is as a professor of leadership, has worked a lot with Capital Horizons over the years, and she'll be talking first. And also there's a general paper that some of you are aware of that she's done on leadership through the coronavirus times that you're all very welcome to read. In terms of the 4 people who will be sharing their experiences, I'll just say one thing about each and make a common link, if you like. All of the people, Laura, Heidi, Fiona and Kamal, have all got a great deal of experience in international development in one form or another. So just to bring that forward for each one. Laura particularly has worked a lot in the background in terms of working on sustainability issues in business, and she's worked with various businesses in that respect at a high level strategically, and she's the chair of our trustees. So Heidi, again, very big background in international development, being the CEO of different organizations, currently the CEO of a community-based, very impressive organization in Dublin that we're working with. And Heidi is also specifically coming from it, she's also a commissioner for human rights in Ireland. So Laura, that business background, Heidi with that perspective of human rights in Ireland. Fiona has got, again, many years of experience in international development, and she is leading an organization, a complex organization, multi-country, on international development. But her specific experience, again, was very interesting. It's coming from working with faith-based organizations as well as international NGOs in a general sense. So thought I'd share that. And then in terms of Kamal, then Kamal has currently, again, the CEO of one of the organizations we work with called Paper Boat. And Kamal has worked in international development for many years, and specifically, interestingly here, for instance, coming from an academic perspective, did his work on related to the caste system in India, and we're particularly working closely with him and in terms of Paper Boat, Southern India, and NGOs there. So interesting perspectives from all of those people. So we'll have Sharon, Laura, Heidi, Fiona, and Kamal speaking first. Then we'll go into the breakout rooms. Then we'll have feedback to the whole group, and specifically in the whole group, I'll chair that bit, but we may unfortunately not have time for each group to give feedback, so we may just take some examples because we want to finish on time and honor everybody's time. And then we'll have Lorna will come back in and give some final high-level reflections linked to the objectives, and Faria, who's our deputy chair, who will be one of the facilitators, will say some closing remarks and thank you all for taking part. So there's a small quote here by Maya Angelou: do the best you can until you know better, then when you know better, do better. So as Lorna said, this is an issue sort of very close to our hearts. It's a very big issue based on the research, and without further ado, we'll hand over to Sharon. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Ian. Well, good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see so many of you, both women and men, because I think this is an issue for all of us to grapple with. I'm sure many of you will have seen that a lot is now starting to be written and published about how gender is playing out at this difficult time during this crisis. I can't possibly cover everything, just to cover a few of the themes that are coming out so that we can discuss those more in the breakout rooms. There seems to be a number of themes. There's economic themes about how COVID is impacting on women's livelihoods. There are social themes about what it's like living, working from home, and how that's impacting on women, including domestic themes around violence and so on, and how women are being impacted emotionally and also from a health point of view. So a few ideas to share with you. Some of you may have seen that the United Nations published a report called The Impact of COVID-19 on Women. Back in April, in fact. A few highlights of that for us to consider today. One is that one of the things that they're saying is that some of the advances that have been made over many, many decades seem to be going backwards. So that's a particular concern, and that gender equality, the progress that we were making, seems to be at risk of being rolled back. Another interesting quote I picked out from that report was from Nala Valji, the Senior Gender Advisor to the United Nations Secretary General, who says, this pandemic is being layered on top of existing inequalities, and it is exacerbating these inequalities. So again, something for us to be all concerned about, that both rolling back and making things worse. And of course, women often work in sectors that have been very badly affected across the world: hospitality, retail, tourism, and many women are relying on those sectors and others for their livelihoods, and of course, often doing 0 hours contracts or just work, piecemeal work, and so on. So that should also be something for us to think about today. A US report said that there'd already been an alarming spike in women's share of unemployment claims. That was in the US, but I suspect that that's likely to be true across the world, that women are losing their jobs faster than men because of the fact that the nature of the sectors that they're in. So again, a number of things for us to reflect on this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, wherever you happen to be. Can I have the next slide, please, Rosie? Thanks. And of course, what's happening in the home. We know already that women are taking a disproportionate share of childcare, but also doing quite a lot of senior care, looking after elderly people. The report says that in the UN, that it seems that they're spending 3 times as many hours as men doing unpaid care, but men aren't always aware of that. So is that happening across all parts of the globe? Let's see what we come up with today and discuss that. And then we'll all have read in the media about some of the threats that women are facing, and some of you may have first-hand experience from the people that you're working with in your countries of threats to safety and domestic violence, people confined at home during lockdown with their abusers. And so there's some evidence that the violence against women has increased in some places by 25%. So another thing for us that we obviously really need to worry about. Some of you may have stories to share, hopefully not firsthand, I mean, but of women that you have worked with and helped. And of course, many of the places around the world that are dealing with this crisis are struggling in terms of leadership. And I wouldn't want to point to some of the awful leadership, but I would like to point to some of the fantastic leadership, particularly that we've seen by women leaders. And Jacinta Ardern has already now eradicated the virus entirely from New Zealand for the time being. And I think you will see a particular different style that she as a leader has been adopting. So I think we should talk about that. There's a claim by the United Nations that there's not enough women doing leadership roles during this crisis. Next slide, please, Rosie. There's been quite a few articles in The Guardian that Lorna kindly passed to me, some of those. The first point was that also in terms of anxiety and levels of emotional fallout, it appears that women are struggling more with anxiety during this crisis and bearing the brunt of the emotional concerns and worries and financial, both emotional and financial challenges. Perhaps that's also linked to the care and support that many women are doing for others, family, friends, elderly, and so on, and supporting the vulnerable. And we'll all have first-hand experience of that in our communities, I think. A quote here, I just have to move the pictures out of the way. Female workers whose children, housework, or other, see, I'm not great with this technology. Other domestic, I see, I can minimize. Other domestic distractions don't allow them to maintain their productivity. Know that their employers will find them easy to dispose of and easy to replace. And that's something that we're very concerned about. And one of the headlines in this webinar was, are employers going to sideline women because they have so many additional people to care for, and are they seeing this in a different light? And that leads us into Colleen Ammerman's paper, which I think some of you will have read in preparation for this webinar, where she actually sees a very big differential between the way employers are treating men and women, and is coming up not only with what the problems are, but with some potential solutions to those problems. So the first, which we will discuss, I hope, in our groups as well, is whether it's seen differently to be a mum or a dad. So she calls this the motherhood penalty versus the fatherhood premium, that women with children are viewed as less competent than women without children or men, including fathers. And of course, you know, why would that be any different? Why are fathers praised more than mothers for caring for their children? And of course, now we're all working from home, unless we have our fake backdrops, as I do today. Our home is visible to the whole world to see. And of course, many people do have their children coming into view on their Zoom calls and so on. So what's going on if there's a penalty for being a mum and premium for being a dad? Next slide. So Colleen Ammerman is talking about some of the things that we have to be aware of when we supporting women and men in the workplace. And one is thinking about the pressures that people are under and how are they dealing with that, and supporting them, because working from home in any situation where you have children or childcare or elderly people to worry about is very difficult, I think. So paring down the pressure, how are we going to stop women from pulling back, quitting their careers even, as there is some evidence that people are, in order to concentrate on the challenges of being a parent and so on. How can employers stop women from moving away, quitting their careers, or simply being completely overwhelmed? And thirdly, thinking about how we run our meetings equitably, thinking about the time of day, thinking about the kind of calls that people are involved with. Are we inadvertently or even deliberately in some cases, excluding women, our voices that should be at the table not being heard because of the fact that we've moved into virtual meetings? And how do we keep digital spaces inclusive? So how do we make sure that we're aware where exclusion happens? So for example, on chat, it's possible on Zoom to have side conversations. Are people having side conversations that exclude certain groups, perhaps women? And also the online socializing, does that actually have a disproportionately adverse effect on women? How do we make sure that women are included in any social space that we're creating? So Ammerman, as you know, is arguing that we should make sure that we're really conscious of some of these things that are working against women more than men. So that leads into some questions for today. And these are just a few questions that we came up with, but I'm sure you'll have other questions. And when the speakers speak, I'm sure that they will speak to these questions, but also perhaps raise further questions for us to talk about. So the first one is, are we in danger of alienating women more than men at this time? Are we in danger of losing talent, as many of these articles are suggesting? How does gender play out and affect our experiences of this crisis? How are parents in general coping with the pressures in their households? We know that this is something that it's like nothing else that we've ever experienced before. Are people with families taking more of their share of the pressures? Next slide, please, Rosie. And of course, we're very privileged to have a group of people from all over the world today. So how do these experiences vary across countries, within countries, between different communities? Are these challenges and problems affecting lower paid workers more than wealthier co-workers? I think it's almost inevitably the case that they are. And so in what case are they affecting people from lower income groups, less privileged people? What else affects the well-being of people in organizations during this crisis, and so on? So these are some of the things that that are being published about the experiences of women and the gender dynamics in workplaces, and these are some of the questions that we would like us to discuss today. And so really delighted that we have 4 people to share their stories for a few minutes each. And I'm pleased to hand over to Laura to say a little bit about her experience.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for such an excellent introduction, very rich in terms of information and also food for thought, I think. Can everyone hear me okay? Maybe some thumbs? Excellent, right. So what I'd like to do in the next 5 minutes is just share 3 main kind of points, if you like. Firstly, I'd like to give a bit of a shout out really to Kepler Horizons. So I've been involved with Kepler Horizons for pretty much since it started 6 years ago. So I started off as an advisor, then was lucky enough to become a trustee, and recently I've become the chair, which is, I'm very honoured to have been asked to do that. And I think it's fair to say, it's no exaggeration, that I certainly couldn't have accepted the role of chair, and probably I wouldn't have been able to have accepted the role of trustee had it not been for the accepting and supportive culture at Capella Horizons, because I am a mum of young kids. So I have a son who is almost 3 years old, and a daughter who I had in January, so she's 5 months now. And when I had my children, at no point was I made to feel that they presented a problem, and a problem for me. It was a celebration that I'd had a family, and I think it's no coincidence or accident that Capella Horizons does use the language of the Capella family. And I felt from the very start that it was something that people were curious into how can we work to make this a positive and inclusive situation. So I think it was a result of that culture. I mean, yes, Capella Horizons does some fantastic work in terms of papers on gender, unconscious bias, that sort of thing, and webinars like we're having today. But I think it's the manifest in the culture is what's really struck me, and it's that has allowed me to. I remember bringing my son to a community day when he was 5 months old, and I had to stand up and give a little presentation to someone. I've got a photograph of that, and I love it. It brings a smile to my face every time because he's looking sweet, but also there I am doing my thing, feeling 100% myself, and not feeling compromised in any way. And more recently, the first board meeting that I chaired, my daughter Asta helped me co-chair it. She was, I think, less than 3 months at the time. And she wasn't perfectly behaved. We had to pass around a little bit because it was pre-lockdown. But I just feel so thankful that I'm able to work in an organisation that doesn't just talk the talk, but walks the walk, and has made me feel comfortable enough to share my whole self. And a big part of myself is being a mother. So moving on to my second point, I wanted to share a few words about what the pandemic has been like for myself and my family. So at the moment, my husband, who's an animator, is fortunate to be able to work at home. He works 5 days a week. It seems that the market for computer games is really strong at the moment, but perhaps not a surprise with lockdown. And so what that means is that the childcare has largely fallen to me. I'm not working at the moment, so I was able to take a bit of a career break. But I am ratcheting up to become a freelance CSR sustainability advisor. So I'm keen to also kind of carry on doing a little bit of work to get myself ready for that. And also I have commitments to Capella Horizons. And I feel very fortunate that my husband gets that. And I think he also knows that if I'm not allowed to do things like that, I can become a bit crotchety. So without actually sitting down and deciding between us what the balance of childcare is, we seem to have come to an arrangement just naturally. And the unwritten rule is that I get an hour a day to do my thing, i.e. I can actually have the 2 children, and we have 2 dogs as well, removed from the house. So the hour today is right now, so I'm in a lovely empty house whilst my husband is taking them out the building. But at all other times, I think we both feel it's only fair that I do the childcare, which I'm very happy to do. I think that we're lucky in that because I haven't got a full-time job at the moment, we're able to do that. But what I wanted to do in preparation for this webinar is talk to some of my friends who are in very similar situations, but are often in situations where they are part of a relationship where both people are working. I almost had to take, pull out of a hat which of my friends I was going to use as a case study today. One of them, who didn't quite make the cut, but she sent me a message. I don't know if you can see it there, but a bit tongue-in-cheek. It says, "This is a mum. A mum," I'm going to just turn it around so I can read it. "A mum has 2 very important jobs to do. One is to look after her children. The other is to do everything else," which raised a smile anyway. But the friend I wanted to kind of use as to share her story with you, which is my last point, is my friend Holly. So we're friends from university. We've known each other 20 years. She's in her early 40s, lives in Brighton. She is senior in her role. So she's an account director for a digital marketing firm. She has a partner who she lives with and their son who's just turned 3. And of all my friends, I think I've really seen the effects on her. And it's not her She hasn't actually complained at any point, but it's just a few times I've caught up with her on Zoom chats, the ones she's been able to make because she's so busy. I've sort of just seen, you know, the pressure on her. So I asked her to explain what a typical day is. And what she said is, well, both her and her partner work 4 days a week. They have their son around all the time because his nursery isn't yet open. So she would typically get up about 7, do childcare till 9, and then balance childcare and work where she could throughout the rest of the morning. Then she would have a lot of client-facing calls in the afternoon, which she really has felt the pressure to not have her son visible, so has tried to get her partner to entertain him, you know, in a different space, because she certainly does feel that there is unsaid, but kind of, she gets the vibes that people are not very impressed when he kind of comes into view on her Zoom calls. And also she really has to concentrate because often she's pitching, so she, you know, she doesn't need a kind of ice pop prodding her in the cheek halfway through that. And she said that while she's, you know, in a kind of balanced and healthy relationship, she feels she takes on the brunt of the childcare. And she actually thinks it goes back to when her son was really small, because she breastfed for a year. And no matter how smart you are, that is something that you really cannot devolve to your partner. And that almost sets a bit of a precedent that then can continue unless you actively check it. She also says she reckons she feels more guilty than her partner does, which is no reflection on him or her, it's just what it is. And so it's kind of, she's the one who has been trying to find childcare, and in fact they have finally got childcare in the last 2 weeks before her son's allowed back to nursery, which has made a real difference. But what I found with her is that she, what has been sacrificed is her spare time. So at the end of the working day, it doesn't stop for her. She then works into the evening, sometimes till 11 o'clock, to make up for time that she's lost during the day. And it's interesting the reflection she has on her employer. So she says that her boss is a maniac, which, I mean, maybe slightly colloquial there, but what's happened is the pandemic has exacerbated any divisions or cultural realities that were already there. So flexible working, she sees as a tongue-in-cheek term, and basically means you just do whatever it takes to get the work done, rather than necessarily the support being there for people who have to juggle childcare and work. She also says that the senior people at her organisation are all men, and they all have partners who don't work at home. So there might be a slight experience gap there in terms of what they are asking for, and not quite realising the pressures that some of their staff members are facing. So she's been really struggling, but doing an amazing job and not complaining either, just kind of taking it as read that this is something that she has to do, and she's highly smart, highly capable. Yeah, I quite liked her quote that she says the pandemic has exacerbated the dynamics already there, so it's normal on speed in terms of the dynamics of her organisation. And she also says that in terms of sometimes the judgment that she feels on a call, for instance, it's not just a male female divide. Sometimes it's women who don't have children who just can, you know, be slightly judgmental, but also it comes down to personality. So there are some men, some women without children who aren't like that as well. So I think there's a slight danger of slipping into a men, you know, women and a gender thing, whereas it's behaviours which can be prevalent in those genders, but actually it does come down to individuals. At the end of the day, everybody has a choice to make on how they respond and behave with other people. I think I'm coming to the end of my time, but one other thing that my friend told me about, which might be of interest to you, is there's a lady on Instagram who is a presenter and a columnist and a journalist who writes a lot about balancing work with motherhood. She's called Mother _ Pukka, P-U-K-K-A. She has 265,000 followers. I was actually looking at her page earlier today. Really interesting. And her latest post has actually said, I've been interviewed so many times about the impact of the pandemic on women, and saying, you know, what's next? And she almost feels like she's had an epiphany and thought, crikey, it's my kids. And so she's now taken an enforced break until the 28th of June, because it's almost like she's writing about these things and suddenly she's like, oh my God, I'm writing and I'm not practicing things. So for her, in order to get the balance, she's having a break till the 28th of June. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Laura. That really does bear out a lot of what's been written about in the literature. So thank you for those stories. And let's move straight on to Heidi. May I ask the other speakers if you can go quite rapidly, because we do need to make sure that we have time for the breakouts. I'm sorry, because I know you've all got an hour's worth to say. So I don't have a way of catching people's eyes, so I'll trust you implicitly. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. So I'm going to talk about my personal experience, what's happening in the community, and what have we done to pare down the pressures. So as Ian said, I'm running a multi-million-euro organization with close to 140 staff. I'm also one of the top human rights and equality commissioners in Ireland. My husband and I have the same level of education experience. He's working between 15 and 20 hours a day, every day of the week since the pandemic started. So as the good wife, I decided that to support him, I was going to do everything else. So I'm the one who's minding our elderly. I'm the one who's taking the phone calls. I'm the one who's arranging for food for our 80, 90-year-old uncles. Because we don't have kids, it's assumed that we have time, that we have the resources, everything. So I'm the counselor, I'm the shrink, I'm the cook, I am everything. First world problems, I acknowledge it. We have somebody who is amazing and helps us 2 days a week. And she's part of our family, but she hasn't been here in 11 weeks, 12 weeks. So I ended up washing, cooking, cleaning, doing everything else. I have the burns to prove it. I can't iron. After week 9, actually, I felt completely overwhelmed, stretched to the max. I've also been working every single day of the week, including Saturday and Sunday, from 8 in the morning to 9 o'clock in the evening. So at one point, I felt completely overwhelmed. So I called what I called a friend and a mentor. I called Ian to chat about how I was feeling. And it made the world of difference. So what's happening in the community? Uncle San is the largest community-based organization. We have 137 staff, and we also have about 150 partners around Ireland. So we do everything from early years education, mental health and suicide. We have wraparound services. When the lockdown was announced, government brought all of their services and assistance online, assuming that everybody had access to a laptop, internet, phones, and all of that. So over 500,000 people filed for unemployment, but it was estimated that over 150,000 people did not. And they were wondering why. We knew why. There is a digital divide that was exacerbated during the lockdown. I have to give you the stats. Only 48% of the population in Ireland have digital literacy, which means that 52% don't. Uncle Sam works with that bottom half. So there was a huge assumption that people had the digital skills and were able to function like everybody else, but did not take into account class, space, resources. So imagine if you're a lone parent or your spouse is abusive or is suffering from alcohol issues and you live in a one-bedroom apartment. Imagine if you don't have a laptop, internet, phone credit. Forget my first world problems. Imagine if you no longer can drop off your kid at school, tell your spouse that you're volunteering for 1 or 2 hours. Instead, you're actually attending counseling. This has been a huge issue for our parents, and they're not coping. We're getting a lot of phone calls in relation to self-harm. We're getting a lot of phone calls about feeling like a bad parent. So what have we done to address this? I'm trying to, go quick. One thing that I've done is I keep on reminding people that we are not working from home. We are attempting to work from home in the middle of a pandemic. Did you all hear that? We are not working from home. We are attempting to work from home. And it's madness out there. So let us be kind to ourselves. personally, I had to make my work environment work for me. I am working from home. We had to do a risk assessment, and it was either the deputy or I, so I am working from home. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. So what we have done is whatever we have offered to the community, it's being offered to staff. As an organization, we are offering 30 classes per week. 30 courses per week. That's massive. And we did it the day after the lockdown was called, so which is really important. So as an organization, we are open every day of the week from 8 to 9 in the evening. And I am going to address some of the things that Laura mentioned. We went online the day after the lockdown was declared. We are producing and delivering food parcels, videos for the children. We work with a lot of children that have disabilities or live with disabilities. You know, like these videos, this communication, this lifeline to the parents. And we're also offering counseling pretty much 24/7. So what have I done for my staff? When I visited a lot of the communities, both Sierra Leone and Liberia after the Ebola outbreak, it was very clear that it was women who suffered the brunt of the outbreak, and also after, the stigma that came after. So I have applied some of those learnings to the services to try to mitigate the isolation and stigma that's there. So I am very lucky. Well, I handpicked them. My management team is all women, and they rock. They're awesome. So we schedule all of our phone calls around their schedule for both managers and staff. I raised my two nephews, so I know firsthand, as a single parent, so I know firsthand what it's like when your employer truly backs you and supports you. It makes a big difference. So staff tell us what hours suit them, what works for them. They can start early or finish late. They can also go on reduced hours. We start every meeting with a circle, a meditation, a prayer. Everybody has been assigned a buddy or a friend. To stay connected, we have Monday water cooler meetings or Monday meetings from 1 to 2. And people come, show up, and we also break into rooms to talk about mental health, to talk about movies, to talk about cooking, whatever you want. So we have about 9 groups. And then on Thursdays is the formal meetings from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. And this is an opportunity for people to ask questions, to learn. We actually have had Kapler come, and they're coming in 2 weeks. And I'm almost finished. We also have mindfulness and meditation Friday. We have parenting classes. We have videos for the children and the parents. This doesn't sound like a big deal, guys, but it is done brilliant work, because in this you talk to the camera, the early years teachers, the counselors do the sessions, and you feel like they're talking to you. And to have somebody say, I'm struggling, this is crazy, or this is not normal, or my gosh, has made a big difference. We are also doing food parcels for the community. You know how I said over 150,000 people were not able to apply for their services. We are helping them. They don't have laptops, they don't have credit, they don't have phones, they don't have the space. We're getting a lot of phone calls from bathrooms and from cars, and also late at night. Staff can avail now of all of these services, including me. And I'm also making sure that I talk to somebody every day of the week. I don't cook every weekend like I was, because I wanted to make sure that I was supporting my husband, that I took that of me. I actually, at one point, I was very upset with myself, because I thought, what was it? What possessed me to think that I am superwoman and that I could run a multi-million euro organization I could support 140 staff, I could support my husband, I could support my family. And I go down the list, and at one point I forgot about Heidi until week 9, and I hit a wall. So now I'm not working one day during the week, and I am making sure that I have somebody that I talk to every week. And I'm also practicing what I'm preaching, which is I am not working from home. I am attempting to work from home, and I am practicing kindness. And also when I get tired, I get tired and I take naps.
Thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you so much, Heidi. And I think your words will resonate with every woman here, and probably most of the men, if not all of the men actually, because it's not just about children, as you've so rightly illustrated. It's often about dual careers. It's often about, and your illustration of the digital divide is so important for us to remember. Thank you so much. And clearly we have been far over ambitious, asking people to speak for 5 minutes. It's clearly impossible to share all of your thoughts in 5 minutes. So I think I apologize for giving you too tight a time, all of you. Having said that, Fiona and Kamal, please try so that we have enough time in the breakout groups too. So I won't hesitate any further. I'd like to invite Fiona if you would like to share your experiences, and thank you, Fiona.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So as Ian said, I work as the head of capacity development with Edmund Rice Mission, which is the Congregation of Christian Brothers Overseas Development Programme. And probably of relevance to this conversation is that the Congregation of Christian Brothers is a male Catholic religious congregation. So there may be some inherent gender issues at play. Thanks for the opportunity to share this morning. And I've been reflecting on the invitation and the topic over the last, I suppose, days and actually couple of weeks. And I have one point to make, I think, about opportunities at this time, and then maybe 3 about the risks for everyone, but with a spotlight on women during this time of COVID-19. And as Heidi said, not really home, not really remote working. And just briefly, by way of introduction to my perspective on gender, I do feel I've been lucky in my family and educational background in that I left school and further education believing that I had opportunities. But really thinking about it over the last few days, I still never expected it to be equal. So even though I thought I had opportunities, I believed that I always also thought I had something to prove. And if I was going to advance, I had to prove that I was equal to, or maybe outshine men. And also relevant to this conversation is that I'm the mum of twin 13-year-old boys, and I don't have any daughters, and I only have sisters. And in line with Heidi saying that we're not remote working, neither are we homeschooling. And it may, until I reached my wall, it may have taken me several weeks to realize we're vaguely trying to navigate our children through some sort of structure to keep everyone sane, and having occasional piece of respectable homework handed into the school, but it's not homeschooling. Now, just to shine a spotlight on, I think maybe, or just to think about opportunities that are presented at the moment, and one thing that I really welcome is the spotlight that's being shone on the challenges of work-life balance. And I'm hoping that as we exit from this, that there'll be an opportunity to build on that. And as I look back, for many years, as I took somewhat more senior roles in organizations, I didn't advertise that I had children. I don't think I hid it, but I certainly didn't wear it of the badge of honor that's alluded to in that article that Sharon referenced, that sometimes men do. Because rightly or wrongly, I thought it would go against me. And I don't know if that was just my perception. So I wasn't upfront, and now on reflection, I think that that's doing parents a disservice, and I wouldn't do that again, and we shouldn't. Because we're working parents, it isn't something to hide, it's something to celebrate. And accommodating parenthood for mothers and fathers is the only way we're going to have gender equality in the workplace, which brings diversity and ultimately, articles have shown, profit and prosperity. So I don't think COVID-19 is a great leveler. I think it affects us unequally, but it has shone a spotlight on the challenges of work-life balance for men and women, and I hope we can build on it. Then secondly, I just wanted to briefly reflect on 3 of the challenges that I think are particularly present for women in this environment of working from home. And it's not just during COVID-19. I think that these are challenges that are present for people who work in remote settings. So for example, in a decentralized international development organization where people are working all over the world. And I'm an advocate for flexible working arrangements and facilitating them. But I think it has the challenge to be, we need to make sure that it's inclusive of women, because it also has risks. And very like Laura referenced, anecdotally from talking to friends and family, and now research is backing it up. When women work from home, they have been shown to bear more of the burden of domestic duties, as Heidi has referenced, and we may be making those choices, but domestic duties and childcare. And then the second point, at its worst, it can be an environment that enables abuse. And Sharon referenced that one of the tragic side effects of the COVID-19 restrictions has been an increase in reports of domestic violence. In Ireland, I know that at least 30% increased reporting of cases has taken place. And I think I thought the statistics were slightly higher in the UK, and that has been borne out by global research, including from the UN. So we now have data, and COVID-19 has shone a spotlight on a conversation that's long overdue. And I think we need to be really observant and really open. And Sharon said earlier that hopefully none of us have personally experienced this. And of course, that's all of our hope. But I think we need to be very aware. And in my experience, it's not the people we most expect. In fact, professional working women juggling the demands of work and family may look to the outside world as the most assertive and potentially invulnerable to abuse, but may in fact be the very people who are most susceptible. So in our remote working environments, however we can build in opportunities to make sure that we are observant and open, I think we need to take those opportunities. And the final risk, I think, for women is strongly referenced in the article, is that remote working can risk further exclusion in our organisations, possibly especially in organisations that may be traditionally patriarchal, as there would be the risk in all male religious congregations. And in an environment like this, people can revert to default or familiar decision-making patterns. So the people who are normally present when big decisions are made are invited to be present. And sometimes women may not even realise that they're excluded. So maybe we need a conscious bias rather than an unconscious bias to make sure that we're keeping gender on the agenda in meetings and decision-making. And I know that the situation of COVID-19 is extreme. And as Heidi said, it's not normal. And the pressure on families has been immense, with schools closed and access to childcare reduced or absent. But as we adjust and emerge from this new normal and hopefully embrace opportunities of remote working, because they're immense, I suppose I invite us or challenge us all to be conscious of the risks. And the final point, I think, is probably in line with what Heidi said about, I think I'd finish on kindness and compassion. And all of us, men and women, struggle with work-life balance. I constantly struggle with it. There's that famous article that why can't women have it all? But maybe it's about us being kinder to ourselves and others and accepting that we have choices to make at different times and we can change those choices. And maybe our challenge is creating an enabling environment in our workplace where family life and personal life is embraced and openness is welcomed, so that we can help ourselves and others to be our best selves. And my final note, I think, is very much in line with what Laura said. And I think Kepler Horizons does provide a model of an inclusive and enabling working environment. And it was one of my first really strong experiences working with the team in Kepler Horizons, of it being okay to have personal challenges evident in the workplace and to really focus on the strengths that we bring, cognizant and supporting people with those challenges rather than it being something that we needed to leave behind or leave at home. So thanks for the opportunity this morning. I don't think I was too far over the 5 minutes.
No, thank you so much, Fiona. So powerful and very much illustrating some of the previous points, but also some very strong arguments there. And I love that kindness and compassion argument, which also, Heidi was talking about being kind to herself, as was Laura. Thank you very much indeed. So much food for thought. Now, our final speaker, Kamal, was very reluctant to speak because this is a topic about women, but I think eventually persuaded him that actually this is not about women, this is about men and women and how we work together and support each other. This is all of our problem and not just women's problem. So I did finally clinch the deal to get Kamal to be our final speaker. So over to you, Kamal. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. And just to sort of, build on those comments, I think where my sort of slight discomfort came from was that, on the face of it, I want to say a bit about my personal experiences under lockdown and the impact on, the focus of the webinar. On the face of it, I think some of my personal experiences might come across as quite progressive. But actually, when I sort of scratched the surface, I realized that a lot of my experiences were just, an element of male privilege. And that's why I said to Ian, and why I said to you as well, Sharon, that I wasn't entirely comfortable with being a speaker. I was more than happy to chip in my two penneth, but I didn't think I should have a platform. But then Ian and your good self, I'm sure learning from Ian, managed to be very persuasive in these matters. So I said I would do it. My name's Kamal. I'm the director of a little charity called Paper Boat. We work in India with vulnerable young people in disadvantaged communities to support creative learning opportunities for those young people. And up until September last year, I was the only member of staff at Paper Boat. And we'd been through a very, very difficult, challenging 2 years. And it was only in September that we felt we were really in a position to possibly advertise for another member of staff to come and work with me. But because we were in a fairly precarious financial position, we didn't advertise a particularly big role. We advertised for an internship, and the salary wasn't particularly great. We were very, very fortunate to recruit my colleague Joe, who's absolutely phenomenal. And it became very obvious to me, from interview onwards really, that Joe was enormously more talented than either the money that we were paying for this role, and also what we were calling the role. We were calling it an internship, but Joe had innumerable talents beyond that. So fairly early on, we increased her salary by £5,000 in the first 3 months. The role went from intern to Programme and Communications Officer to Programme and Communications Manager. And actually recently I've been talking to Joe and our Board of Trustees and saying, look, Joe's pulling every bit as hard as I am here. I think Joe really ought to be co-director with me. I think there needs to be salary parity. I know I'm aware that I'm just spending money, but as soon as I bring in some money for the organisation, I would really like to move to that position of salary parity and equal roles in the organisation. So that was a little bit about Paper Boat. And then we went into lockdown just before the actual official lockdown in the UK. We were lucky to have a member of the Board of Trustees who works for NHS England. He saw what was coming on the horizon and he said, I think we all ought to be working remotely. So we started working remotely pretty much from the first day of the last Capital Horizons Community Day. That's when we started working remotely, so before official lockdown. But when official lockdown happened, I was in a position where my wife had been made redundant a few days before going into lockdown. And so whilst this put us in a personally sort of fairly precarious financial position, we'd just taken on a mortgage for a new house, and now we were down to one salary and it was a bit more precarious. But the advantage was that when we were required to have homeschooling, we were able to share the burden, and we did share the burden. I would do the mornings, B would do the afternoons. If I had to do a bit of extra work, then B would pick up the slack, and if B was feeling a bit sort of it was all on top, then I would pick up the slack. So I think there was a genuine sharing there. And then about 9 weeks ago, B got a short-term contract with her old employers, and I was in a position where I had to full-time be director of Paper Boat and do full-time childcare and homeschooling as well. And I think sort of on one reading of that situation and my experience has been that actually, I've really struggled to do that. It's left me feeling like I'm playing two roles and doing them both badly. It's left me feeling that I'm juggling lots of balls, invariably dropping those balls. Relationships have, suffered a little bit of at work. I feel I'm not investing the same amount of time that I'd like to in my son and his homeschooling. And I feel a bit, all those feelings of sort of guilt and low self-esteem and low self-worth as a result of doing two things badly. and that's one sort of reading, and that sort of given me a deeper insight into the juggling of childcare alongside the juggling of full-time working responsibilities. So that was an interesting insight for me. But another reading is that actually what's going on is a lot of male privilege here. And, actually I've had an amazing time with my son over the last 7 or 8 weeks. It's a very broad definition of what education is that I've brought to the situation, where we've been off and visited Neolithic stone circles and made wishes by the wishing tree, and the deity Amazon managed to bring the drone that Israel wanted from the wishing tree, and we've been out flying our drone, and we've been out poaching pheasants on Wafiq Said's estate after reading Danny the Champion of the World, and not with a lot of luck with pheasant poaching. We've been learning about Kandinsky and how he saw music and heard sounds, which I found fascinating and could apply to work. So it's been really lovely to spend all that time with my son. And my board is still paying me full whack for, full salary. They're being very flexible and understanding that, I'm having to juggle childcare. I know that I'm not in any danger of losing my job. And at the same time, my colleague Joe, who's on half of my salary, is probably picking up a lot of the slack for me not being able to, give as much to my day-to-day work as I'd like to be doing. And I just feel that, I'm in an incredibly privileged position, even though, I'm having to juggle childcare and juggle the work. Now, I think it probably would be fairer if my trustee said to me, actually, Kamal, if you can't work as efficiently or as effectively, maybe we should dock your salary, and maybe we should give Jo a chance to take over leadership of the organisation and increase her salary. Maybe that's, a bit more of an equitable situation. I don't know, but it's left me feeling a little bit uncomfortable about my male privilege in all of this. And I think, that's what I really wanted to end on, just sort of leaning into that discomfort as part of the conversation. I don't have any answers. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I feel uncomfortable.
Thank you so much, Kamal. And you see, our hunch was right. We did need you to speak. And I think it is really important to have the voice of all genders, and to hear from men as to what that feels like, supporting the family and women. And I totally enjoyed meeting your little boy during our call. It was fantastic. I do think when we do meet people in their homes, it very much humanizes people. I find it endlessly fascinating looking at what's behind people, and especially their kids and so on. Fantastic array of 4 different speakers. There's a lot we could say about how much those resonate with each other, but time is marching on, so I won't. And I will now hand back thank you all first very, very much for those great illustrations. And am I handing back to Lorna or?
Me. Thanks, Sharon. Great. So for some of you that might not have been here right at the beginning, we're now going to be going into some breakout rooms where we can actually start to discuss your own experiences and sort of stories as well. So I'll just bring up the slide. So here we go. So this will be a really nice opportunity to you to be in smaller groups, so about 3 and 4 people in each group, to get to know one another, but also to share your stories and experiences. And if you can, it'd be great to think about some actions that we can all take to support women and men through this crisis and beyond. And each group will have a facilitator, so they'll be there to answer any questions that might have come up and to sort of help guide the conversation. But we're really happy for these conversations to go wherever you want them to go, and so it should be good. So we're thinking we'll have about 20 minutes in these breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap it up so that we finish on time. It should be fairly straightforward going to the breakout rooms, but if you have any issues, there is an option to sort of ask for help. There's a sort of button you can press. So if you're all happy to, I'm going to open the breakout room.
I'd just like to, we're going to finish on time, which is only 9 minutes, and so therefore Lorna's going to sort of start to wrap things up, and then Fario will close. I'm literally only going to be able to get 1 or 2 stories from one or two groups. I'm going to definitely call on on my group to start with, because I think we all agreed in our group that if we did have time to share, because it picks up on some of the very difficult issues that are going on, but also in a positive way. I think, Tina, can you share what you're doing, your work, and the story of Bermuda, just very briefly, and then I'll call on someone else. Yeah.
Okay, so what I had talked about in the group was the fact that me being a relationship specialist in Bermuda and domestic violence advocate, as well as a supporter 100% of working with Elaine Butterfield at Women's Resource Center, one of the things that really sparked my interest was the conversation Heidi had as it relates to digital literacy, and how many of our individuals who are impacted by domestic violence here haven't been reached. You know, sometimes we think of the big things, but that's really huge. Although so small, is huge. So, you know, I'm just now wondering, how is it that we can't really impact those who have been affected and we haven't been able to reach? And so that's really my plight there. How do we now do this? And although we are going to new phases in our social or physical distancing, phase 3, you know, there are still so many women and or children and seniors and men who are impacted by domestic violence who we aren't able to reach. So how do we now reach them without having to knock on their door, you know? And so that's just something that sparked what really had me thinking. Like, I thought I was reaching people. We thought we were reaching everybody, but everyone doesn't have a digital device. So to get to us. And one of the ladies in our group, Karen, had mentioned, well, just give them a call, pick up the phone and call them. And which that's correct. But then many of you who have by personal or somebody else will know that if you're in a home with a batterer, it's very hard for you to pick up a phone and have a conversation, an honest conversation, when you have that batterer over your shoulder. So now how do we effectively reach and meet these needs of those who's being affected?
Thank you very much. That's very powerful. I'm just going to call on maybe Faria, if you could, I know you're going to wrap up at the end, but is there anybody in your group either you'd like to call on, or just give a summary from your group, and then you'll move on?
I guess that I won't speak because I'll be speaking in a minute. There was points made from everyone, but if I can pick on Danielle, if that's okay, just in terms of what you were saying with exaggerating disparities in lockdown, both the pros and the cons, and what you've seen. Okay?
Yeah, so we were just thank you. We were just talking about that. I think it's in the article about disparities of gender being exaggerated during lockdown. I think some of the speakers touched on that as well, and we talked about actually any kind of disparity has been exaggerated because of lockdown. One being gender, but also ethnicity. But also we were talking about company culture. So if your company culture already had an element of presenteeism or of patriarchy, then lockdown has probably exaggerated that. If you had a culture that was trusting and flexible, then lockdown has probably exaggerated that and the positive. So it almost feels like lockdown and coronavirus has exaggerated what was already there. It was just an interesting point that came up in our conversation.
Okay, I'm just going to ask for maybe one more. I'm going to see Angela, all we can. I'm just trying to see your face. But Laura's just messaged me to say you had a very interesting perspective. If you're okay to share, that would be great, Angela.
Oh, okay, Laura. I thought Laura was going to share on our behalf. I think I was just talking about how sometimes we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Obviously in the lockdown, sometimes certainly when I was coming into lockdown, I thought I wouldn't have as much work actually, and I'd have to sort of think about what to do. But sometimes I was saying that I'll be in my office from morning to really to the end of the working day within various meetings. And that's not because that's the culture of our organization. I think, people know that, but just simply because, there's a lot of different balls to juggle. And then on top of that, then pressures that I've put on myself in terms of, okay, all of a sudden mom is at home. So how do I demonstrate that mom is home? So, can I cook something special, most days, or can I, keep the house looking good a particular way? I've got a 15-year-old, I've got a 20-year-old. How am I more present with them as well? And obviously with my husband as well. So I think I was just saying that, the times that we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And I was saying that I had booked holiday, which I thought I wouldn't need to take coming into lockdown. And actually I got to the point thinking I need to take holiday, I need to take time. So I think just again, just that reflection for everybody to say, I think, you know, where there is holiday, take holiday and take time off just to be able to rest and recuperate and just really focus on you and recharging, etc.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to hand over to Lorna now, and then Faria. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just wanted to draw it to a close by just kind of reiterating themes I think that have come out today. I mean, a big one that's been picked up in lots of different ways, and in our group as well, was that one of self-care during this time, and being kind to yourself, kindness and compassion, and making sure that, you know, we're not trying to be superwomen, superman, just this is a pandemic, it's not normal times. The other one was about being whole in the workplace, bringing your stuff to work if you can. Obviously some organizations you can't do that. The fact that the impact on women is both a women and a men's issue, and also that sense of time and time value has been really brought to the fore, where our time has almost, the amplification, as Danielle was saying, of everything, but time being a sort of economic commodity that we measure ourselves and our value by the amount of time we can put into work, the amount of time we can put into childcare. And I think most importantly, and you said it very well, Danielle, was that whatever has been going on has almost been amplified. It's like the spotlight on inequalities. You know, we're seeing that in the Black Lives Matter movement, we're seeing that in gender, we're seeing that in, as you said, when organizations and things are functioning really well, they work even better. When they're not working well, that really draws a spotlight on other things that need to happen. And a good example of that was from Elaine from Bermuda, from the Women's Centre, saying, actually, what the lockdown has exposed is just how difficult it is for some people, and having that better understanding now, because the honesty has, people are in very bad situations, which meant they're more honest about it because there's nowhere to hide it anymore, and just exactly how bad some of the problems are that might not have otherwise have been known because they're hidden. So I think there are the main kind of things coming out of the conversation. And I think just finally, I'd just like to thank everyone for being so honest and open in the conversations. I think that's the thing for me in particular that's really moved me is, and I said this in our breakout group, just feeling surrounded by a whole bunch of people who are willing to be open and share their experiences is really profound. So thank you from me.
Thank you. So over to you, Faria, just to wrap up, if that's okay. Thank you, Faria.
Yeah, no worries. I won't take up too much of your time. It's just a load of thank yous, basically, because a lot of people put in a lot of effort in bringing this webinar together. So thank you first to Sharon for providing always her knowledge and expertise and providing the context for this platform and for the discussion to really kind of take off and flourish, and providing that groundwork to start with. Our four speakers, Laura, Heidi, Fiona and Kamal, as Lorna said, without them kind of sharing their personal expertise and being so open, I don't think maybe some of us wouldn't have felt as comfortable with sharing such personal experiences. You can feel quite vulnerable speaking about this topic. It can be quite sensitive. So I think by the four of you providing your situations and your experiences to kind of start with and being so open, that allowed us all to participate in the breakout rooms fully. Thank you to Kapla as always for providing this platform. I think it's a great example of not just kind of like practicing, it's practicing what you preach. There's loads of papers that Kapla put out, but again, providing this platform for us to all kind of talk and discuss and hopefully learn from it. Thank you to Rosie for the technical stuff. The breakout rooms for me worked out great use of technology. So thank you for doing that. And I guess a takeaway for me, I won't name any names, but in terms of, I think for me, it's just important for us all to kind of recognize our privilege, but not letting our privileges also kind of take away from the personal experiences that we're feeling too. I guess there's comfort in knowing that a lot of people are probably going through something that you're going through as well. So again, having such an open talk and talk about this hopefully bring some sort of comfort to us. And as Heidi said, and which I love, we're not just working from home because we want to work from home, we're working from home during the pandemic. So please, everyone, just be kind to yourselves, take a nap if you can, and look after yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, bye then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. See you
Thank
soon.
you guys for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really good.
Great to
Thanks.
see you all.
Nice
Thank
to
you
see
so much.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Sharon.
Ian. Nice meeting you
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Looking forward to see you again.
Bye.
Bye.